Story 1. I never liked driving at night. Too many shadows playing tricks on your eyes. Too much silence to think. But I was hungry, and Taco Bell was the only place open that late in our town. The one on East Street stayed open till 2 a.m. on weekends, which made it kind of a last resort for people like me. Restless, alone, and in need of something warm to shove into the pit of whatever was keeping us up. It had been a rough week. My mom had just gone into hospice care, and I was visiting her every day. Those visits drained me, emotionally and physically, in a way I can't really explain. After sitting with someone who's slowly fading in front of you, the silence of an empty apartment becomes unbearable. So that Friday night, after another grim visit, I found myself pulling into the dimly lit Taco Bell parking lot around 1:20 a.m. There were no other cars. I remember thinking that was odd. It was usually at least half full at that hour, especially with bar crowds drifting in. The inside lights were on, and the drive-thru sign flashed open late in its usual flicker. I pulled around to the speaker. Nothing came through, just static. I said, "Hello?" and waited. A few more seconds of that soft, insect-like hum. Then a voice crackled through, distant and flat. "Pull around." "No, welcome. No. Can I take your order?" Just those two words. I hesitated. Something in the tone. It was wrong. Not rude, exactly. More like disinterested, unhuman. But I shrugged it off. Maybe it was a new employee. Maybe their intercom was just busted. I pulled around to the window. No one was there. The screen inside was on, glowing behind the glass. A few fryers buzzed in the back. A lone packet of hot sauce sat on the sill like it had been placed there carefully. But no people. I waited. A full minute passed. 2. I honked once, lightly. Then I saw movement. Just the edge of it, like someone stepping back into the hallway leading to the freezer. I leaned closer to the window, trying to peer around the edge. "Hey," I called, "I think your speaker's broken. Can I get—" The window slid open, slowly. No one was behind it. I stared into the opening, confused. There were footsteps, somewhere in the back, quick and light, like bare feet slapping on tile. Then silence. "Hello?" I asked again, louder now. A voice whispered, "What do you want?" I couldn't place where it came from, not directly from inside. Almost like it was just beside me, maybe even behind. I spun around. Nothing. I turned back. There was a paper bag now on the ledge inside the window. It hadn't been there 10 seconds ago. I didn't order anything. I hadn't even spoken my order. The bag was stained slightly with grease at the bottom, and it was warm when I touched it. Too warm, like it had come from a different building altogether, like it had been waiting. I thought about driving off. I really did. But some combination of hunger, confusion, and sleep deprivation convinced me to just grab the bag and leave. I didn't look inside. I drove home with my hand clenched around the wheel, that bag sitting in the passenger seat like a sleeping animal. When I got home, I placed it on the kitchen table and stared at it. The top was folded shut, not rolled, just pressed down like someone had changed their mind halfway through sealing it. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, not moving. Eventually, I opened it. There was one burrito inside, no wrapper, just sitting directly in the bottom of the bag. I didn't eat it. Something about the way it sat there, it looked wrong. The tortilla was dry and slightly cracked, like it had been microwaved and left out. I don't know how to explain it, but I had the sudden, overwhelming sense that if I touched it again, I'd find something hidden beneath it. A hair, a piece of paper, a fingernail. I dumped the whole bag in the trash and took it outside immediately. The next morning I went back to that Taco Bell. The manager on duty was a young guy, maybe 20. He told me they'd closed at 10 the night before for a deep clean. No one had been there past then. He even showed me the security tape for the window. Between 1 and 2 a.m., the footage just skipped, jumped from one frame to the next, with no clear time code. "We've been having weird issues with the system," he said, laughing it off. I didn't laugh. I haven't been back since. Not to that one. Not at night. I still get Taco Bell sometimes, sure, but only during the day. And I never use the drive-thru. Story 2. I was dog-sitting for my sister in a rural part of Oregon. Small town, lots of pine trees. The kind of quiet that hums in your ears when you try to sleep. Her dog, Toby, was this jittery little terrier mix who barked at everything. Wind, his own reflection, static on the TV. It was supposed to be an easy 3-day weekend. Just feed him, walk him, keep the house from burning down. On the second night, I got a craving for something disgusting. You know the kind. Your body's too tired to cook and too wired to sleep. That kind of hunger has no logic. I Googled what was open and found a Taco Bell 20 minutes away, tucked off the highway that cut through town like an old scar. It was around 11:30 when I left. Toby whined at the door as I grabbed my keys. I remember thinking he seemed more anxious than usual, but it was probably just the unfamiliar routine. I left a light on for him and headed out. The drive was uneventful. Dark roads, no traffic. The Taco Bell sat by itself near an old gas station. It was one of those weird hybrid ones, sharing space with a KFC, though the KFC part had been shut down for a while. The windows were boarded, and a sagging "Coming Soon" sign hung crookedly over its door. The Taco Bell side was still operational. A single employee manned the front counter, a tired-looking woman with red-rimmed eyes. She didn't say much when I walked in, just nodded. I ordered 2 soft tacos and a Baja Blast, then sat at a booth near the front while I waited. That's when I noticed it. The silence. No music. No hum of a drink machine. No beeping fryers or sizzling grill. Just the faint buzz of the overhead lights and the occasional metallic clunk from behind the counter. Even fast food joints have a rhythm, a background murmur of existence. But this place was hollow, like the walls had absorbed sound. The woman called out my number. I stood to grab my food, but paused when I saw something out the corner of my eye. A figure, sitting in the farthest booth, near the boarded-up KFC side. I hadn't noticed anyone come in. They were completely still, head lowered, face obscured by a hoodie pulled tight. Their hands were on the table, pale fingers twitching slightly. Just the 2 of us in the dining area now. I took my food and sat back down at my booth, trying to act normal. But I couldn't eat. Something about the way they sat, unmoving, like a posed mannequin, set off every alarm in my body. The employee didn't seem to notice them at all. She busied herself behind the counter, never looking their way. I tried not to stare, but I kept glancing over. At one point, I swear they tilted their head toward me, just slightly, not enough to be sure. That's when I decided to leave. I grabbed my tray, tossed the untouched food into the trash, and headed for the door. Just before I pushed it open, I heard it. A soft voice, barely above a whisper. "Toby's alone." I froze. I didn't turn around. I didn't look back. I just stepped outside, got into my car, and drove. Heart pounding, hands clammy on the steering wheel. I tried to convince myself I'd misheard it, that it was the drive, the tiredness, some stupid mix of guilt and paranoia. But when I got back to the house, my sister's house, something was off. The front door was ajar, not wide open, just slightly, maybe an inch. The lock was scratched, like someone had tried to force it but given up. I burst inside, calling Toby's name. I found him under the bed, shaking violently, tail tucked so far between his legs it looked like he didn't have one. He wouldn't come out for hours, not even for treats. Nothing else in the house was touched, nothing stolen, no signs of entry. I checked every door, every window, twice. I stayed up the entire night with a kitchen knife next to me, every light on. I told my sister the lock must have been weak. I told myself the same thing. But I never figured out how that person in the Taco Bell knew my dog's name. I'd never said it aloud, not even once since leaving the house. I don't eat Taco Bell anymore. Story 3. It was the summer after college when I started delivering for Uber Eats. I had no direction, no job lined up, just a mountain of debt and a creeping sense that I'd already peaked. Food delivery seemed harmless. Flexible hours, decent tips, no manager breathing down my neck. I usually worked late nights. That's when orders surged and the streets emptied out. You could drift between houses and fast food joints like a ghost. One night, around 1 a.m., I got an order for a Taco Bell run, 2 Chalupa Supremes, a Nachos Bel Grande, and a large Mountain Dew. It came from a neighborhood I didn't recognize on the map, outside my usual radius. But it was a slow night, and I needed the money. The Taco Bell itself was just off a frontage road, tucked behind a shuttered auto shop. Half the lights inside were off. I walked in and waited by the counter. The girl working didn't look up when I said the name on the order. She just handed me a bag that was already waiting near the register. As I turned to leave, she said, "Don't go to the back." I paused. "What?" She didn't say it again, just stared past me like she was watching something behind my shoulder. Outside, everything looked normal. The streets were dark and quiet, the only sound coming from an overhead power line buzzing faintly in the night air. I loaded the bag into the passenger seat and pulled up the address. The map took me toward the outskirts of town, into an area that felt half-finished, like someone had started building a suburb and then given up. A few cul-de-sacs had houses, but most of the lots were empty, just flattened earth, weed-choked driveways that led nowhere. The delivery address was 57 Hale Drive. I found the street, but the numbering was off. There were houses numbered 51 and 59, but nothing in between. Just a narrow gravel lane between 2 empty lots, the kind that looks like a driveway until you realize it goes on longer than it should. Still, the GPS was insistent. 57 Hale Drive. I followed it. The gravel shifted under my tires for what felt like a full minute. No lights, no mailbox, just trees on either side, pressing in close like they were leaning forward to watch. Finally, the road ended in a small clearing. There was a single trailer at the center, old, dented, and squatting low to the ground like it didn't want to be seen. The porch light flickered, dim and yellow. I parked, cut the engine, and just sat there. I don't know why, but I felt a strong, physical resistance to getting out of the car, like gravity had tripled inside the cabin. Something about that trailer. It was too still, too symmetrical. I felt like I was looking at a stage set, not a home. Eventually, I forced myself out and grabbed the bag. I walked to the porch and knocked once. Nothing. I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. Then, just as I was about to leave the bag and go, the door opened an inch. Not enough to see anyone, just enough for a smell to hit me. Something metallic and wet, like rust and damp earth. A hand emerged, thin, almost skeletal. It didn't reach for the food. It pointed to the side of the trailer, behind it. I couldn't see what was back there, just a narrow gap between the edge of the trailer and the tree line. I stayed frozen on the porch, food still in my hand. Then the hand retreated, and the door closed, gently. I backed away, almost stumbling off the step. I dropped the bag on the ground, got in my car, and reversed all the way down that gravel lane without turning around. When I got home, I reported the address as invalid. Uber Eats didn't follow up. They never do. A few days later, I was scrolling through local Reddit threads out of habit and saw a post vitaled, "Does anyone know what happened to the Taco Bell girl?" It had a blurry photo of the same employee I'd seen that night. The top comment said she hadn't shown up for her shift since Tuesday. That was the night I'd been there. I went back to that Taco Bell a week later, just to see. There was a different crew working. When I asked about her, the manager said, "We haven't had a girl fitting that description in months." I still deliver sometimes, but if a drop-off leads down a gravel road, I cancel the order. Every time. Story 4. It was my first night living alone. I'd just moved into a cheap, one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a shoebox with peeling paint and pipes that groaned when you flushed. The place smelled faintly of old wood and mildew, but it was mine. After years of roommates and shared kitchens, I finally had a place where I could breathe. That first night, I didn't feel like cooking. I barely had any dishes unpacked, and my fridge held little more than beer and expired ketchup. So I walked to the Taco Bell 2 blocks down, mostly because it was the only thing open, and I didn't want to deal with delivery people figuring out where my door was. It was around 10:45. The restaurant was mostly empty. Just one other customer, an older man sitting alone in the corner, staring intently at the wall. The guy behind the counter looked half asleep, slumped over the register like he regretted every life decision that led him there. I ordered something simple: bean burrito, soft taco, cinnamon twists, and took a seat near the front window. It was quiet. Too quiet. No music, just the hum of the soda machine and the occasional beep from the fryer. I remember watching the man in the corner. He hadn't moved once, not to take a bite of his food, not even to blink, it seemed. He was turned slightly away, but I could tell something about his posture was off, like he was frozen mid-action. The kind of stillness doesn't come naturally. The cashier called my name. I grabbed my tray and sat back down. I kept looking over at the man, trying to figure out what it was that bothered me. Then he moved. He turned his head slightly, just enough for me to see the profile of his face. He was smiling. Wide. Too wide. Lips curled back in a way that didn't seem physically possible. I know how that sounds. Maybe it was just a trick of the shadows, or the way the overhead lights hit him. But I remember it vividly. That expression. It wasn't joyful. It was practiced, like someone imitating a smile they'd seen in a photo but didn't understand. I looked away quickly, heart suddenly racing. I ate fast, tried to pretend I wasn't rattled, but the sense of being watched wouldn't go away. You know when someone's looking at you. You just feel it, like a weight pressing on your chest. That's how it felt. Heavy. When I finished, I stood to throw my trash away. That's when I noticed something. The man's tray was empty, spotless. No wrappers, no crumbs, nothing to indicate he had ever eaten. Just an untouched napkin, folded perfectly in half. And written on it, in pencil, was a sentence. "You left your window unlocked." I froze. My legs wouldn't move. I just stared at the napkin, my pulse pounding in my ears. When I looked up, he was gone. No sound. No door chime. He was just not there anymore. I bolted out the front door and looked around the parking lot. Empty. No cars besides mine. He couldn't have walked away that fast, not without me seeing him. It was open space in every direction. I ran back to my apartment, keys trembling in my hand. When I got inside, I locked everything, bolted the door, checked every window. They were all shut, except one, the bathroom window. It was cracked open maybe 2 inches. just enough to slip a hand through. I closed it, latched it, sat on the floor, and stared at it for an hour. Nothing happened that night. Nothing tangible anyway. But I barely slept. I kept thinking about that napkin, about how someone, whoever that man was, had known, had been close enough to see. I went back to that Taco Bell a few days later. The cashier didn't remember me. When I asked about the man, he said no one else had been in the restaurant at that hour. Said the lobby was usually dead after 10. Said I'd probably just imagined it. Maybe I did. Maybe moving out alone messed with my head more than I thought. But every night since then, I check every window. Twice. And sometimes, when the wind picks up just right, I swear I hear someone whispering on the other side of the glass. Smiling. Story 5. It happened during a road trip I took by myself the summer after my divorce. I needed to get out of the city. Too many memories. Too many familiar places that had turned sour. So I just started driving. No destination. Just highways and gas stations and cheap motels with sagging mattresses. It felt good to disappear, at least for a while. One night, somewhere in the middle of New Mexico, I took a wrong turn looking for a gas station. I ended up in a town I'd never heard of, one of those towns that barely exists, with a few low buildings clustered near a dead rail line and dust crawling over everything. I was running on fumes and hunger. My phone had no signal. My GPS map had turned into that featureless beige grid it shows when it doesn't know where you are. But there was a Taco Bell, one of the older ones, the kind with the faded purple signage and the glass atrium up front. It was open. The neon sign buzzed and blinked unevenly, but the open late banner was still clinging to the window like a dead moth. I parked and walked in. There were no customers, no music, just a man behind the counter wearing the full uniform, visor, name tag, headset, but no expression. He didn't greet me, just stood there. I said hi, tried to smile, asked if the kitchen was still running. He didn't speak, just turned, slowly, and walked into the back. I almost left right then, but something about the place, the weird dead energy of it kept me in place, like I was watching a play unfold and couldn't look away. After a few minutes, he returned with a tray. Taco, burrito, drink. I hadn't ordered anything. Cash only, he said. His voice was quiet, but clear. I reached into my wallet. By some miracle, I had a 20. I handed it to him. He didn't give me change. I sat down and picked at the food. It was warm but bland. No wrappers, no receipt, no sauce packets. Just the food on the tray, like it had been waiting before I walked in. That's when I noticed the photos. On the wall next to the soda fountain, where most fast food places put up local school team pictures or employee of the month plaques, this place had photos, dozens of them, all printed in black and white, all grainy and off-center, like security footage stills. They were all of people sitting in booths. Every photo was time-stamped. Most were taken between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m., and every single one showed a customer sitting alone, looking toward the camera. I stood up and walked over for a better look. Some of the faces were blurry, others crystal clear. A few of the photos were slightly warped, like they'd been exposed to moisture. But one caught my eye immediately. It was me. Same jacket, same expression, same tray in front of me. The timestamp was exactly 2 minutes ahead of the current time. I backed away from the wall. The man behind the counter was gone. I hadn't heard him leave. I hadn't seen a back door. But he was no longer there. The kitchen beyond him looked empty, silent, cold. I walked out, tray still on the table, heart hammering in my chest. I practically ran to my car. When I got in, the lights inside the restaurant cut off in an instant. like someone had flipped a master switch. The whole building went dark. I started the engine and peeled out of there, tires skidding over loose gravel. I drove for an hour before I got signal again. My GPS snapped back online, and I found a real motel near a town I recognized. I slept with the lights on. The next morning, I tried to look up that town. The name on the Taco Bell receipt had been smudged, but I remembered the exit I'd taken. Nothing came up. No Taco Bell, no matching street names. The town wasn't on the map at all. Later, I checked the photos on my phone. I hadn't taken any, but I always had automatic backups turned on. That night, blank. Nothing from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m., except for one image, buried in a random system folder, no metadata. It was a photo of me, sitting in that booth. And this time, I wasn't looking at the camera. I was looking at someone across the table. Someone not in uniform. Someone I never saw.